Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Here we talk about chronic illness, disability and mobility aids, and today I want to tell you about a nightmare holiday that I went on when I was about 16. No, I was 15. I was diagnosed when I was 16, so I must have been 15. For context, at the time of this holiday, we did not know what was wrong with me. We knew that there was something not quite right, but we didn't know the extent, and we also didn't know what was wrong. So this particular holiday was just me and my mum, and we went to Madrid, which should have been just an amazing holiday, an amazing memory, and it isn't an amazing memory. It's quite an unpleasant memory, unfortunately. So I think this trip being way too much for me to handle really helped the vague issue that there was something wrong to a, oh my god, there's something really wrong, and it's much more intense than we thought it was. We became a lot more aware on this trip what the problem was. So this trip was when I was 15, before I was diagnosed, but I'd started showing some vague-ish symptoms. We knew there was something not quite right, but we didn't really know the extent of the problem, and we also didn't know how much it affected me or really how it affected me. So we just thought, let's go on a holiday, that will be fun. The year previously, me and my mum had gone to Paris, and we'd climbed the Eiffel Tower and walked all over Paris, and we'd had just such an amazing time. And as other family members couldn't go on holiday that year, we decided we would just go the two of us and have another amazing, just the two of us holiday. We knew I wasn't as fit and as healthy, we knew there wasn't something quite right, and we knew that I wouldn't be able to do as much as I did in Paris. But I think we didn't understand how much we needed to scale back, so I did way too much. One of the first things that was a problem for me was the heat. It was obviously the middle of summer, and Madrid is hot, and I didn't know how big of an issue heat was going to be for me until this point. Heat for me now is very stressful. I get a lot of anxiety in it. It makes me even tireder. It makes me feel sick. It's really hard to do physical exercise in any type of heat, and what I mean by physical exercise is any walking in heat, and it was really hot, as you would expect it to be, but it was really hot. And since starting to get unwell, I'd only ever been in England, and so heat hadn't really been a problem, and goodness gracious, heat is not okay for me. So one of the first things we did in Madrid was we went to this really great market that people had told us about, and it wasn't really great. It was a bit dull, a bit lacking. There wasn't that many stalls, and they weren't very good. I don't know whether it was just that day or we were in the wrong place. I don't know, but it was not good. And we looked at a couple of stalls with some jewellery, and then there just kind of seemed to be stalls full of kind of just general tat, which we weren't that interested in. And my mum kept saying, I've been told this is really good. Maybe this is just like one end. We need to like get to the main bit. Let's just keep going. Let's just round this corner and we're just a bit further, and I'm sure we'll find it, the main bit. And I was walking along after her in the heat, feeling grumpy as anything, that this market was not that interesting. It was really hot. The stalls were spaced quite far apart, and every time we'd turn a corner we'd see, oh, 3 more, but not this big, expansive, vibrant market that we'd expected. And the further we walked, the more grumpy I got, and because I was tired and I felt unwell and I was too hot and I just wanted to go, Mum really wanted to see this nice market she'd been told about. So we kept walking for too long, as you used to do in the olden days before you knew what was going on, and still sometimes now. You think it will be fine, and my mum, not knowing what was wrong with me or that there was something that wrong with me, was trying to cajole me, keep my spirits up. Oh, it's, we'll find it soon, and we didn't. And there just kept being not much there. And then we had to walk all the way back, still in this heat, still not having done any actual fun shopping. It was disappointing and painful. So that wasn't the best first day, but it wasn't a disaster. When we were at our hotel, funnily enough, we knew there was a pool on the roof. That's so cool, right? Never seen a roof pool before. It was the evening. We'll go look at the pool just to see. So we go to the roof, and there's a bar on the roof. Okay, so where's the pool? It's not, you can't have multiple roofs, really. It's quite, quite compact because it was in the middle of Madrid. So where's the pool, and we felt a bit silly because it should be obvious where the pool is. But anyway, we gave up. And the next day when we wanted to actually use the pool, we looked again, and funnily enough, where we'd been stood was where the pool was. They had put a glass platform over the pool for the bar area in the evening, and the floor was glowing blue, and we hadn't interpreted that as glass over water. We'd interpreted it as glowing like dance floor almost, but it was actually the pool lit up underneath this glass floor. So that we thought was very funny because we were absolutely baffled. This is the roof, where's the pool? We stood right on it, exactly on top of the water, couldn't find it. Not really chronic illness based, just thought that was hilarious. So if you ever can't find the pool, I stood on it. So the main reasons we went to Madrid were to go to museums and look at art. My mum loves museums and I quite enjoy them too, so we were going to museums. The first museum we went to was quite contemporary and it was nice and cool inside, so that was a nice relief, and it had some really amazing art. There was this one piece of art that had projectors of these little people, and the people were swimming, so it was all sinks and toilets and baths, and the water was running, and so they would go down the plug hole of a sink, and then they would come out of the tap of a bath and swim around, and then they go down and it was just really cool. I just really liked it. Also not relevant, but I just enjoyed it. Those are some of the better memories of that holiday. Unfortunately, then we went to see Guernica, which is basically the reason my mum wanted to go to Madrid. She wanted to see Guernica so bad, and so we went to the museum that has Guernica in it, and Guernica's right at the end. So we walked around this museum and looked at lots of things. Interesting, sure. And I started to feel unwell, but there was no chairs and there was no way to really rest or leave, and so I just kind of kept going. Mum was having a great time looking at art, so I was just kind of following her around, trying to feel okay, even though I didn't, but I couldn't explain what was wrong. It wasn't a wrongness I'd specifically experienced before. Since then, I've experienced it plenty, and I know that it's a very common symptom for me. But at the time, there was just something absolutely wrong that I couldn't shake, and I was trying really hard to not ruin this museum for my mum. And honestly, the longer I tried to be okay, the less and less okay I became. And so by the time we got to see Guernica, I felt awful. But Guernica is this one massive painting and it's in its own room. So I thought, if I sit against the wall at the back, I won't be in anyone's way because everyone's looking in the other direction at the painting. So I sat down at the back on the ground, just because my mum was so excited to see this painting. So I just thought, if I just sit down and just wait, I'll be okay, and I just give her the time to see the painting and then we'll go, because this was the last thing. And so I sat down and I sat there for maybe 30 seconds, and this museum guard with his walkie-talkie and everything comes over and says, "You can't sit there." And I just kind of went, "What? Please?" And he was like, "You can't sit there, you have to get up." And my mum came over, and I think she said she doesn't feel very well or something. I can't really remember that bit, because at this time I felt unbelievably awful. Everything hurt, I felt sick, I felt like I was dying. I was just like, this is just not how people feel. This is not how humans feel when they've been to a museum. This does not make sense. But I just felt like absolute death. So he insisted that I had to stand up, and I really could not. And in that moment, I really, sometimes I tell people this just to put in perspective how truly out of my mind I was at this point. I really, at that point, thought in my head, it would be really great if I vomited right now on this man, because he'd really regret making me move. That was where my mind was. I felt so unwell. I really thought vomiting would be, you know when you feel that sick and you're like, vomiting might make me feel better. So I was like, that could be a possibility. And I was so out of it, so in pain, that I didn't care that I was in a room full of people. I didn't care. You don't want to vomit on a person, but I was so unwell and I was so just deranged by this point that he told me to get up, and I thought, you know what, you deserve to be vomited on. I've never thought that before or since, but I just remember it's such a clear thought of, if I vomited now, that would show you not to tell people to stand up. I wasn't in anyone's way, I wasn't like a tripping hazard, nobody was nearby me. Just leave me alone. I just want to lie here and die. And he told me to get up, so I did. And I was like, not okay. So my mum took me out and we went to the little cafe thing, and we sat down on the chairs and had some chips, I believe. But my mum got to see this painting that arguably was the main reason why we went to Madrid. She got to see it for like a couple of minutes. And my mum will stand and look at art. She finds it so interesting, she really loves it, and she wanted to see that painting so bad. And because the security guard wouldn't let me sit, she didn't get to see it for very long. And I think it is a problem with a lot of museums, just a complete lack of accessibility. There's no chairs. If I want to sit down, I have to sit on the ground because you've not provided any chairs. That's a problem. Not everyone can stand the whole time. Not everyone is able to do that. Lots of people have different chronic illnesses or disabilities or pregnancy issues that mean they need more sitting down time. And you want me to go through a museum I'm supposed to be in for hours, never getting a seat, and then you want to make me leave because I sat down, and that's not allowed, meaning that my mum didn't get to see that artwork. And obviously we then left the museum, she couldn't go back in without repaying, and she would have had to leave me alone, and I didn't feel well and there was nowhere for me to sit. It's definitely a museum thing that they don't have a lot of chairs. Not all museums do. Sometimes they have those like benches in the middle. Love museums with the benches in the middle, but a lot of them just don't. They expect everyone to just be able to stand and look at art, which is very unhelpful to a lot of people. And so that was a absolute nightmare. So at this point we were in the cafe and I was eating chips, and after I don't know how long, a while, I started to feel okay, and we tried to work out what on earth had happened, and we did not know. So for some context, at this point I didn't have a diagnosis and I didn't know what was wrong with me. Several months earlier, I believe I'd been put on iron tablets, and those had helped me improve slightly. And so we thought it's an anemia problem. And then we went to Madrid and I was still on the iron tablets. And obviously, because I overworked myself, I was dying. I was having really bad symptoms. And so we realised it's not anemia, or at least it's not only anemia. So we started brainstorming other things. So we thought, do I have a B12 deficiency? Was it something about the food because I felt better after I'd eaten? Was it the walking around? Was that the problem? So we had lots of theories and we really didn't know what was going on, but we also knew that we couldn't keep doing what we'd been doing. So pretty much for the rest of the holiday, we didn't go to any of the museums my mum wanted to see, and we didn't go to any of like the historical buildings my mum wanted to see. We either went to the pool and sat by it in the shade and read books, or we were in the main square. I'm not entirely sure what it was called, it might have been called the main square, and we would sit at this one specific cafe, eat tapas and read our books. That's what we did for the rest of our holiday. So I think it was maybe 2 days. We went to an art gallery on the first day, an art museum on the second day, and then the rest of the week we did nothing because I couldn't do anything. And that was not what we had anticipated as a holiday. And obviously if you go on holiday on purpose to rest and to sit in a beautiful old square and watch people or sit by a pool, it can be really lovely. Those times weren't unpleasant, they were lovely, but that's not what we had anticipated. We had anticipated a holiday similar to when we went to Paris, where we went to the Eiffel Tower and Sacré-Cœur and the Arc de Triomphe and museums and galleries, and we went and did stuff. We went and saw things, and that wasn't the same, and it was just a year apart, and it was a completely different holiday because I had deteriorated, and I was to deteriorate a lot more from this point. but we didn't know that at that time, and we didn't know what I was going to end up being diagnosed with. We had theories that the amount of physical activity was the problem, was one of our theories, but I don't think either of us knew anything about ME, CFS. I don't think either of us had heard of it at this point, so it wasn't really tossed out as an option, as a theory at this time period. We really just didn't know, and that holiday has such it's such a sharp memory of thinking that it would be a good idea to vomit on a man in a museum. I mean, it's not the man's fault. I'm sure he didn't make the rules that nobody's allowed to sit. It was just his job to tell me not to sit. It's not his fault that there weren't chairs provided. It was just his job but I didn't care. In that moment, I did not care about any of the realities of his job. In that moment, he was evil to me because I was so unwell. In that moment, he was absolutely the worst person I'd ever spoken to, ever met, and I just thought, and I'm sure he didn't have the intention to cause that much difficulty or pain for me, but you know, he did. And unfortunately, the policies of that museum not providing chairs or allowing you to sit on the ground is a big problem. And to this day, my mum always talks about having not properly seen Guernica and how she wants to go back to Madrid to actually do the museums properly, and she should probably go without me. Well, maybe not to Madrid, but to the museums. I'm not the best at museums, though I do have the wheelchair now, so I am better. Still not great. So that trip was a lot, and this slots right into my chronic illness story part 1, before I got a diagnosis, but when we knew there was something wrong with me. If you want more context about the whole process, I have the chronic illness story playlist linked in the card and in the description. Thank you so much for watching. Bye! So PSA, if you see someone sat on the floor somewhere they're not supposed to, be careful, because if you tell them to move, they might vomit on you.